With all that said, Max, I'd like to hand it over to you. Thank you for being with us today. Thanks everyone for joining, and welcome to the basics of branding.
Of course. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'll start sharing my screen. Thank you all for being here. I see some familiar faces in the audience too, which is always fun. Hello, I'm Max. Today I'm going to go over the basics of branding, how to establish and grow your business presence online and offline. I work as a digital marketing manager at Portkey SEO Solutions. I've been an artist and a graphic designer my entire life, and have been working with Portkey for a little over 2 years. I'm going to focus primarily on how to build your brand online. We're going to look a little bit on offline platforms and stuff as well, but because I'm a digital marketing expert, most of what we're going to focus on is your online platform. I grew up around websites and web design, so I've made it my mission to improve the online presence of businesses everywhere, which is how we're going to start. What you're going to learn today, we're going to learn about a lot. I'm going to try to fit a lot in just an hour here, but today we're going to start with brand identity. That means logo design, but it means other things too. So identifying customers, your competitors, etc., and going beyond the logo to develop more of your brand. So branded voice, website design, and much, much more. When we talk about brand identity, it means who you are with less words. How can you describe yourself in one sentence? And what's that first impression you want to give to customers? And how can you do that effectively? So it can be through color usage, it can be through your logo design, but what are the ways that you can convey who you are to your customers in the most effective way possible? When we talk about effective branding, I'm going to use this word called brand identity a lot. That's all the visual elements of your brand. So color, design, logo, everything that distinguishes you and defines who your brand is in the mind of your consumers. The first thing that you're going to want your brand identity to do is express personality. Effective branding really expresses the personality of your business. It shows who your company is and expresses yourself throughout all different marketing materials. So not just your logo, but social media, billboards, website, etc. What are the ways that you distinguish yourselves from your competitors, and how do you express the personality of your business? Are you really uptight and rigid? Are you super professional? Or are you much more casual, easygoing, flowy? How do you describe that in your business through the different platforms that you have available to you? The second thing I want you to focus on is consistent messaging. It doesn't make sense to build up a whole brand if you're not going to use it across all different platforms. So that means, again, social media, billboards, storefront, website. How do you make sure your branding is consistent across all of these platforms? It means focusing on more than just the visual elements of your brand, but also extending to thinking about, again, that voice that you're using for your brand, the language, how you communicate with customers, in what ways you communicate with customers to make sure you're creating the most effective brand possible. And finally, you want to encourage fondness. Effective brands really strengthen your popularity over time. And I want to focus on something specifically about being charismatic. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, just make everyone like you, but make them like you in a way that improves your business. In what ways do you want people to like you? If we look at different companies right now, if they're building a presence on TikTok, let's say, how are they building that presence? What kind of audience are they building up? Are they doing it through humor? Are they doing it by answering frequently asked questions and doing kind of deep dives into more information about their business? How are you getting attention from your audience, and how do you build that in a way that feels true to you and true to your brand? Next, I want to focus on a specific example. Disney. So Disney obviously has a lot of customers all the time, and they're still to this day expressing their personality. They have a consistent message and they encourage fondness. I'm going to use Disney as an example kind of throughout this presentation, along with other brands and different brand examples. In the future, I'll ask in the chat for kind of your feedback on how you think they check some of these boxes. This isn't going to be the most effective time for me to ask that because we haven't seen if Disney has a consistent message across all platforms yet, but we can certainly see that they express their personality even in just their logo. Disney has a long history of hand-drawn animation. That's where they started. It was kind of what made them unique. So having this hand-drawn logo really exemplifies their history, makes them easier to engage with, makes it easier for people to remember what it is that they do. And just the fact that it's a little hand-drawn, that encourages some kind of fondness. Disney's trying to be fun and playful, and their logo obviously encourages that. If we look at different types of logos, for small businesses, there's a lot of different options. We can start with a monogram or a letter mark. We're thinking of, if your business is an acronym, IBM, HBO, this is the kind of mark that you're going to use. Or we get a lot of people who maybe just want to use their initials for their brand name. That would be an instance where you would use a monogram or a letter mark. I'm going to use lawyers as an example here. Portkey works with a lot of lawyers, and with a lot of these law firms that we work with, if it's a combination between a couple different people where they all have a last name that they want present in the logo or the name of their brand, they'll often opt for some kind of monogram as part of their logo design. A second option would be a word mark or a logo type where the full name of your company is visible as the logo. So Coca-Cola is a good example here. Coca-Cola doesn't have just a CC logo. They have the full Coca-Cola, so you can always read it out. When we work with small businesses, this is one of the ones that we recommend because as a small business, you're fighting an uphill battle to get memorized by your customers. Coca-Cola is a good example of an easy way to be memorized because people don't have to look at this and try to figure out who your brand is like they would with a pictorial mark or a symbol. They know immediately, this is Coca-Cola. I can read it. I know who you are. I'm going to have an easier time remembering it. When it comes to these symbol logos, you see it much more for kind of bigger industries because at this point, they're remembered. Now they have to build a personality. People know who Apple is. They don't have to write out Apple for you to know it's an Apple product. Now they're trying to build more of a statement through their symbol and also focus more on the iconography because icons can be easier to remember in certain levels of your brain, which can make it easier for them to build up the specific type of brand that they're trying to build. Abstract logo marks are another kind of parallel to this, where you're focusing not on the written example of your brand, but the actual just logo mark itself, something iconic that people can remember just the image of and get a sense of your brand through that. Mascots are kind of a step down from an abstract logo mark or a symbol where you're not focusing on some really clean concept or image, but you're instead building out this mascot, this character, which can actually imbue a lot of personality in your brand. We work with some small businesses who we recommend mascots to simply because they have a lot of personality, for lack of a better word, in their brand that they're dying to express some way through their logo. Mascots are a great way of immediately connecting to your consumers if you have a lot of that strong personality, because it's a way for you to give voice to something that didn't have voice before. Your brand is not a person, but if you suddenly create a mascot as your logo, it feels a lot more like a person and can have a voice that feels much more like the brand itself is speaking. Combination marks are ones that we recommend the most to small businesses because you kind of get the best of both worlds. You're getting the word, the name, who your company is, so that people can read it and remember who you are. But then you also mix in an image that people, if they don't necessarily remember your name, maybe they just remember the image. They have an easier time remembering the image, or if they don't remember the image, they have an easier time remembering the name. So you're covering, again, both of your bases. Combination marks don't need to be like the Doritos logo, where the image is literally cutting across the text. It could be like the Portkey logo, where we have an image of ourselves. If you look at the top left corner, an image of a computer, and then below it, the name of our company. And then finally, the last kind of categorization for logos is an emblem. I kind of think of these as like a family crest, where they're kind of a lot more historic feeling. The text itself is sometimes wrapped around an image like it is on the Starbucks coffee logo here. There's sometimes some kind of character or icon, but sometimes it's much more abstract. But again, thinking about like some kind of crest historical, those tend to be emblem logos. And now I'm going to quiz you. Were you paying attention? I want you in the comments to guess what kind of logo the Disney logo is. There are wrong answers, but I'm hoping that this is an easy enough question that we can just warm you guys up a little bit. Any guesses? See, Ray said word mark, Dina word mark, Lance word mark. You guys got it right. Perfect. No notes. Yes, it's a word mark because the full name of the brand is visible, right? So we can read out Disney. Now, you've maybe seen variations of the Disney logo where it's just the D. While that's not their traditional logo, that in that instance would qualify as a monogram or a letter mark. So that's also something that you can consider as a small business. If you're starting to build out your brand and you really like the idea of one certain type of logo because maybe it's more readable, it's more legible, but it doesn't work across all applications, you can create logo variations that maybe fit one of these categories or a different category for different uses. And when we look at other brands, again, it's not just a logo. So Target, for example, while they have elements of their logo visible throughout a lot of these advertisements, it's not front and center on every single one of these. Target's voice, the thing that we're really seeing across all these ads, feels really punchy. It's actionable. If you want to describe how you consider Target's brand in the comments, that'd be great. But it's very active. It's short, usually just kind of one syllable or maybe two syllable words. They're never very long sentences. All of these examples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 123, 1234, 1234. They're all extremely brief messages that capture attention really, really quick and keep it. You can also see Target's brand obviously sticks to really cohesive color schemes. This red and white is the same across all different branding materials that they've created. You can see some variations based on like if they're producing kind of holiday material, sometimes you'll see different color usage, but for the most part, Target sticks pretty consistently to this red and white color scheme. For a client that Portkey ourselves have worked on in the past, we worked with a company on their social media who they were an electrical company. They didn't have very strong branding before we met with them. They used a lot of stock images across their social media. Colors didn't match their branding guide. They have really strange small logo placement across some of these images, but there is still something here. So they had like reviews taken from their Google My Business profile that they showed on their social media platform. That was really nice. It showed that they really cared about their customers, what their customers were saying, their feedback. They really appreciated that they got a lot of positive reviews. But the way that all of this is presented doesn't lead to a lot of engagement. There's nothing necessarily wrong with stock imagery, but when it's the majority of your social media content and you're not doing a whole lot with it, it doesn't really lead to a whole lot of engagement. And again, they're an electrical company. If I was just to look at this, I wouldn't know how this connected to their business as an electrician. So what we did is we took a step back. We redesigned their social media platform so that it had more cohesive color unity between all the posts, that if people saw a post randomly in their feed from Edison Electric, they'd immediately know who it was from simply because of the color unity. We did a better job of imbuing their logo throughout these posts in a way that felt more legible. It wasn't just some small thing tagged in a corner. And honestly, it didn't need to be in every post because we kind of talked to them about this too. While they did want it on some of their posts, on any social media platform that you create content on, your logo is going to be visible just as the icon, usually in the top left corner of whatever post is there. So people are going to see your logo regardless of it, whether it's in the post or not. You can still put it in sometimes, I get that, but we were able to convince them, let's not necessarily put it in every single post. Let's put it in some posts. So that it's still legible, people can still see it, but it doesn't have to be the front and center object of every single post that we create. We also did a few more things for them that made their brand stand out a little bit better. We did employee highlights because they have a very robust team that they're really proud. They're really close. They treat each other like family. And the fact that that wasn't highlighted in their old social media account meant that there was something special about their business that wasn't being explored and wasn't being expressed online. Another big thing we did is, again, taking these kind of reviews that they were getting that they were really proud of, but just exemplifying more what the actual review was, showing the 5 stars and in the description for the posts that were created, explaining in more detail who left the review, what kind of project was done, all of those details that were missing in the original content. So when it comes to you and building your effective branding system, we want to take a step back and think about how you can be memorable, logical, and unique. Effective branding should be memorable and consistent. That's part of the reason you want to be consistent, is that you're reinforcing people's introduction to your brand every time you create content. You want to be logical. For an example, if you were a lawyer, if you came to me and said, I want a logo that's bright green and bright orange and looks like it's handwritten in cursive, I'd maybe say, well, I don't know that it's the most logical choice for your specific brand. You're trying to be someone who looks really professional. People are going to be paying you a lot of money to do something that's really hard. So you want to show them through every aspect of your brand that you take it seriously. And if your logo is really brightly colored and kind of sloppy and handwritten, that doesn't necessarily convey that you're a really professional company. And that's different for every different type of industry. Everyone has a different standard of what's professional or what's logical for your business. But as an example, for lawyers, maybe bright colors is something you want to stay away from. And then finally, unique. While you want to be memorable, while you want to be logical, you also have to figure out what makes you unique. What's the specific niche that you've carved out for your business? What do you offer that makes you different from everyone else? And how is that being conveyed through your brand? I want to focus on Turbo Tim's as an example. If you're not from Minnesota, Turbo Tim's is an auto repair shop in the Twin Cities that's gotten a lot of attention recently because they do a couple really unique things. So one, they're memorable. The combination mark that says Turbo Tim's with kind of this caricature makes them more memorable than if they just had Turbo Tim's or just had the cat. So because they're a small business, they're doing something that makes them a little bit more memorable than just doing an icon or just doing a logo mark. Um, they're also logical, Turbo having this kind of wheel icon in the cat, that all reads it's very logical and helps people understand who you are as a business. And this is, again, just looking at the logo itself. And they're really unique. I mean, do I even need to say it? How many repair stores have cat mascots? Auto repair stores have cat mascots. It's super unique. Um, they also did a really good job of understanding what made them special to their customers. Turbo Tim's is an auto repair shop that has cats in their repair shop, and their whole mentality is that they want their store to be approachable. They want people who normally don't feel comfortable going to auto repair shops to feel comfortable going there. Part of the reason they have cats is because it makes them more approachable, but it also just exemplifies their brand. So anyone who hears about Turbo Tim's knows, oh yeah, that's that store. I passed it a few times that has garage doors painted in rainbow colors and has cats in the store and has a lot of personality. It makes them really easy to remember. And also it makes it a lot more approachable for someone who doesn't have an easy time going to an auto repair shop to go to them because they've become familiar over time with who their brand is, what their message is, what makes them unique. Disney is another example of this that we can look into. Disney's obviously very memorable. They've had a lot of time to build up that memorability. They are logical, as I explained. This logo kind of draws on their history, but they're also a little bit unique. If we look at their social media platform itself, we can see really strong imagery followed with combinations of text that leads to it being more memorable. So Disney obviously is an image focused company. They're creating shows, they're creating movies that are highly visual. So they want to exemplify those visual elements on their posts. If you look at just these top 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 have people or characters really visible. Even 8, if we're ignoring the rotate your device option, 8 have characters who are highly visible. That makes a lot of sense for their brand. If every single post they created was more like this Lilo and Stitch post that was just kind of a logo or text, they'd probably get a lot less engagement. They're trying to, over time, again, build a brand that speaks to what makes them special. And what makes them special is high quality visuals. So they're going to exemplify that in every kind of social media content they create. For you guys as small business owners, I want you to focus on the who, what, and where. I want you to consider who's your customer, who are you serving with your business, where do you find them, where do they spend their time online, and again, what do you offer that's different? You're carving out a niche online, offline, whatever it is. What are you offering to your customers that makes you unique? Because that's going to be the thing that you want to highlight with your branding system and your logo. So what is it that you solve that other competitors that you have aren't solving? What makes you special? And whether you have customers yet or not, imagine kind of what they would say to you if you don't have any. What are they saying to you that you feel like makes you unique? Is it that you are really quick to offer service? Is that you're a great communicator? Is it that you're local? Is it that you're family owned? What about you makes you special? And there's nothing wrong with just being, if you have truly nothing else that makes you special, just being a local business, that's fine. True North Heating and Air is an example of a client that we've worked with where we sat down with them and they were like, I don't know that we have anything particularly like unique about us. We do have some unique qualities in our brand, but I think the most unique quality in our brand is just that we're local and we're an up north company and we like that we're a Minnesota company. Is that crazy that we want to highlight that for our brand? And it's not crazy. A lot of people like supporting local industries, like supporting local businesses. It's also great if we're looking at it from an SEO perspective, that then people who are trying to find you online, you have a much easier time kind of positioning yourself as a local business that serves a specific area that helps you show up specifically online for that specific area. You'll have a much easier time doing that. And looking at another client that we've worked with for logo design specifically, this is a lawyer, Buckley and Jensen, or lawyers, I should say. They focus on bankruptcy and they really wanted, again, a professional logo. They weren't coming to us asking for a bright green, bright orange, bright pink logo. They said, we want more muted tones. We want to highlight who's working here and just give a sense of kind of professionalism. So we looked at, again, how we can design a logo that's memorable, logical, unique. Some of these logos are taken from the very first draft of logo design, so they're obviously not particularly polished, but even just in kind of these sketchier versions, we can see some of them were more memorable than others, some were more logical than others, some were more unique than others. Buckley and Jensen, as a law company again, wanted to have a very professional atmosphere. And some of these logos were really unique, but didn't necessarily give that professional vibe. Like this kind of B and J blocky situation that's in kind of the middle of the unique row, it reads as really unique for a law company, but the reason it reads as unique is because it doesn't necessarily give the professional vibe that we were looking for with Buckley and Jensen. So that was an example of an idea that while it's very unique, we had to scrap because it was maybe too unique. So that's something to keep in mind with your personal brand. If you're creating a bunch of logo variations, because you should be creating multiple versions to review, maybe the versions that are most memorable and most logical are the ones that you should consider. And the ones that are maybe middle of the road unique are the ones that have the most strengths for you, because sometimes if you get too unique, it can be a little too crazy. Focusing more on kind of brand identity, and how you kind of can build that effectively as a business owner. It again doesn't come from just luck. It comes from a lot of intense effort. So we want you to analyze your company and your market. We want you to determine key business goals that you have as a business owner. We want to identify your customers, and we want to determine the personality and message you want to communicate. So this is where you've kind of taken a step back. You've gone, okay, I really know who my brand is at this point. I want to convey this specific message to my customers. Now I need to understand who my customers are so that I can convey that message effectively. These are some questions to ask yourself. So when it comes to company purpose, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to be known for? And what do you think your customers need? So kind of expanding on that earlier idea of what makes you unique. What are you trying to be known for? This was an example of a client we worked with who posted a lot of recipes on her blog online. And she wanted to be known for a really easy to navigate site where people could find her recipes super easily. Everything is right there. It's very easy to find what you need. You don't have to scroll through a whole story to find a recipe. You can just find it immediately right on her blog. Part of the way that she conveyed that was even just in the imagery she used. Like all of these recipes have a top-down image of the recipe completed, so that people, as soon as they get to her blog, immediately can see what they're creating instead of having to kind of ponder and consider, oh, do I want to make a peach and pecan baklava, or I don't even really know what that is. I need to see something. She had examples really easily found throughout her sites that people didn't have to question where to find things. It was really easily found. She knew that a lot of her customers were going to be single moms or single parents at home who didn't have a ton of time to sit through and find a recipe, but just needed to search something quick and get it immediately. So that changed the whole way we constructed her site, because it wasn't about creating an experience where people would take their time and scroll through a bunch of recipes to find what they wanted and hear her story, but instead it was much more clear cut and people could find what they needed super easily. Other questions you should ask yourselves when examining your competitors is, how do you feel about those companies? So again, we're not just looking at your customers, you're looking at the people who you're going to be competing with in the future. How do you want customers to feel about your company compared to those companies? And what are the reasons that those companies are failing and succeeding right now? You might really like how someone's website is configured online. One of your competitors' websites is configured online, but if it's not benefiting them, maybe it's not something that you should replicate. That being said, we get a lot of clients who come to us who, when we start building their website, we'll send example links and say, I really like these 3 websites. 2 of them are my competitors. I really like how they did XYZ. That's great. That's a great first step to building an effective online presence, is to look at your competitors and go, what's working for them? Because they're in a similar industry. They've probably done a lot of research and they have a lot of time and experience built up in their industry. Take that experience and try to apply it to your own business in a way that makes sense for you. If you like how something is structured on their site, great. Have it replicated on your own site. Do it in a way that makes sense for your business and tells your story in an effective manner, while also fulfilling the needs of the clients that you have. And then after you've done all of that, sit back and go, what are your future goals? Where do you envision your company to be 5 years from now? How can you encourage repeat customers? How can you encourage loyalty? And where do you show what your business is currently working on? The whole reason we construct a brand and a brand identity is so that you encourage a sense of self throughout your brand, which helps with loyalty. If all the components of your brand were completely different and didn't coordinate at all, people would have a much harder time remembering who you are and coming back to you in the future if they ever wanted to repeat, buy a product, or get a service. So in 5 years, hopefully you've built up an effective brand. This is an example of a client we work with who has 2 different companies, and both of them have a similar message: comprehensive and compassionate care. But the way that that's conveyed says a lot about how she wants these 2 different companies, what direction she wants them to go in. One has a strong focus on pediatric care. So we can see a lot stronger imagery of children throughout the site. We can see the colors even feel more childlike. They're a lot more playful in just these kind of swooping images. There's bubbles. Not sure that you can see all the little bubbles because they're a little faint, but there's a lot of bubbles and kind of textures throughout the site that makes it feel more playful. And there's reviews from parents pretty early up on the page that tells about their experience with going to this dentist and what their children's experience was like. Um, that all feels much more kind of playful and like pediatric care than the option on the right, which is much more subdued. Even just in this first kind of imagery right here of leaves, it's much more serene. You feel calmer when you end up there. You don't see a bunch of images of children, but instead you just feel a lot more at peace because this site's focus was about specific specialty surgery care. So we wanted people to end up here and go, okay, I feel calmer. I'm with a professional, someone who knows what they're doing. And I get a sense of that immediately once I end up on the site because there's one, a lot more informational resources that are really readily available as soon as I end up on the site. But two, even just the colors and the font choices and all of that feels much more serene and calming because this is going to be a big decision for me. And I want to feel secure when I'm making that decision. For your target market, looking at your customers, we want to focus on where your ideal clients spend their time, what's valuable to them, what's their priority, and how do they find you. So now that you've kind of analyzed your customers, you've analyzed your competitors, you know where you want to be in 5 years, you have all of that figured out. Now you need to figure out how to actually talk to your customers. What are the most effective platforms to do that? It could be social media posts. It can be Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, if that's where they're at. It could be through your website. It could be through specific ad campaigns like billboards, Google Ads, a Google Guaranteed campaign. It's really about finding where your customer is so that now you've crafted this perfect identity that's meant to communicate with them. You can actually do it. It's like writing a script for a phone call, but now actually picking up the phone to talk to your customers. So the one thing I'll mention here too is when it comes to websites in particular, a lot of businesses will need some kind of website at some point just to have a space for their brand to grow online and to build their SEO. So even if your customers can't find you immediately online, there are ways of making your website more found online through strategic SEO strategies that build your presence over time. And then again, if anyone wants to take a screenshot of kind of questions that you should be asking yourself, these are all the questions that we've gone over of really just getting a better idea of what your brand is trying to accomplish, who your brand is, what kind of questions you need to ask to better understand who your brand is, so that you can use that then going forward to make sure every time you create a piece of marketing material, every time you create a billboard, is it still in line with how you answered those questions originally? Because your brand needs to be consistent. And if you answered where you want your brand to be in 5 years, and 5 years from now you go, oh, I'm not there because I don't think I was really doing these things that I lined out for myself 5 years ago. That'll be the reason why. So you have to create a strategic plan that you can actually implement and use consistently day after day so that it's effective 5 years from now. One of the first ways we're going to do that is by developing a voice. So again, we've created the visuals. We understand who your competitors and your customers are. Now we have to actually think about the written components. So how do you want your clients to see you? How do you want them to feel about using your products and services? And how do you want to be remembered from a client? This is an example of a customer that we had in the past, moving company. But the way that they created their site and the way that they followed up with clients is a great way of how you can develop a voice. So they had all the content throughout their site had a really consistent voice. They're a local company, they have a small team, kind of family value company. So all of that was exemplified throughout their site. But then it was also exemplified in how people interacted with them. One, really quick to pick up the phone, really quick to answer questions over the phone or email or text or whatever was most convenient for their customers, but also in the follow-up of, we've moved, great. Now we're going to follow back up with you and ask, how was it? How did you feel? Do you want to leave us a review? Did you have any questions, concerns throughout the process? Just making their service better at the same time as they're also reinforcing who they are to their customers so that when those customers need moving in again in the future, or they have a friend who needs help moving in the future, they remember your company better because you've done follow-up in a way that exemplified the voice and the values of your business. Another example of just kind of a branding system now in general, going beyond the logo, is the company that I worked with recently. They're a vehicle wrap training company. They wanted their website to be really professional because it was an education resource to their potential customers. They want it to be easy to navigate. It needed to be cohesive, branding across a lot of platforms because, again, they're doing these training events in person and online. So all their different materials need to be really cohesive. Um, so that everyone who interacted with their brand had a chance to remember who they were and reinforce their branding over time. So for them, yes, we created a logo. Yes, we created a website, but we also created business cards. We created print materials, shirt mockups. We created all these different touch points that customers could then use when they were interacting with their brand. So that it had a much easier time, customers had a much easier time remembering who they were. And a big way that we did that was just by building a branding guideline booklet. I would say that not every single small business needs a branding guideline booklet, depending on where they're at. But if you want your business to grow over time, you definitely do, because this is going to be your resource, whether you're creating co-branded materials in the future or you just need to create consistent brand materials across advertising campaigns, social media content. This is going to be your resource to make sure it's consistent so that all that work you've put in, all those questions you've asked yourselves, all that research you performed actually matters. Because if you put in all that work to do that research and create a sense of who you are as a business, you should be able to create then a template that explains to anyone who's first coming across your brand who you are, what you do, what makes you unique, what's your niche. And then I'll dig a little bit deeper into this, but this was an example of a website that we created. So again, focusing on one aspect of a branding identity. This is an example of a client who came to us. This was their old website, which looks, I mean, fine at a glance, but the colors didn't really support their branding. They really wanted yellow and black as their branding colors. And there's a lot of green here that they weren't expecting. Buttons on the site didn't work. So that first like request a quote button that's on the top of their site, that didn't work. So people couldn't request a quote as soon as they got to the site. A lot of the content was really outdated. User flow hadn't been considered. So when customers first got to the website, the information that they needed or the contact option that they needed weren't readily available. So there's nowhere for clients to go. There were spelling and grammar errors across the site, which is always super fun. The company name was even misspelled. And even beyond that, the way services were described didn't make sense for this business. So they were a septic installation company kind of along the North Shore in Minnesota. And the pictures that were used throughout the site, some of them were using kind of tools and equipment that they didn't use. Some of them were taken in places that were obviously more tropical that they didn't serve. And a lot of the service descriptions were pretty vague at best and at worst describing services that they didn't provide. So they came to us and said, hey, we just got this website, but it's not doing what we needed to do. It's not telling our customers who our business is. We know who we are. We know we're a family-owned company. We're along the North Shore, so we're a pretty remote area, and we know what we do. And our site isn't showing customers who we are. It isn't showing them what we do, and it's not visually conveying any of that information or written out conveying any of that information. So we need to rework this so that it aligns with our brand. We went, okay, we can do that. So now the branding system's been considered. Client navigation is made a lot easier. So clients had a much easier time calling or getting the quotes that they needed. The site function improved immensely. Buttons actually work. The written content actually works. So all the written content that's throughout the site actually explains what their services are. And those services are much easily found even on just the homepage of the site. All of the icons were created completely custom. Their personality is considered. So right at the very top of the site, they have that who we are section that it shows who they are as a business, that they're a family, that they value families and have those kind of small town values. And it's not a cookie cutter site. So that first example of a site, as a website designer, I pulled it up and went, okay, I think I've seen this exact site before. I know the template that was created. They asked this company maybe like 6 questions and went, okay, I'll copy, paste it into the site. I'm done. That doesn't take a whole lot of work. We're going beyond the cookie cutter site and saying, how can we exemplify the values of this brand? How can we show their personality? So that includes for them showing that little map of Minnesota because they're local, showing who they are as a family. So showing pictures of them as a family because they're a family business, and showing actual photos of their work because previously on their site, the photos didn't make sense. So exemplifying all the values they had as a brand in a way through their website that was done really effectively. So that when customers first learn about this business, that first interaction they have with them is already a positive interaction. This is just another example of kind of consistent messaging across platforms now, going beyond the website. It really is a strategic effort. Every element that you create for your brand should be found everywhere. So if you create this really cool logo for your brand, but then all of your brand materials, like if this is a green logo, all your brand materials are pink, that doesn't quite make sense. Um, Having your company's name, logo design, all that stuff highly visible across media platforms is huge. It's going to reinforce the branding system you've created. The style and tone of your copy should be consistent across platforms. The look and composition of posts across platforms. So this is an example on the right side here. We can see Google ad campaigns. On the left mimics the website design. So all of it feels very cohesive. It means if someone sees just the website or just the Google ad campaign, they already have a good, strong sense of your brand. And finally, your online presence, where your brand identity should be ingrained in is your website, your Google presence, so Google Ads, Google My Business profile, social media, email campaigns, advertisements. Your content should be identifiable, even if your logo or your name isn't present. That's the one thing that I think you can take away for this idea of branding identity, crafting your branding identity is even if your logo isn't present, your brand should still be recognizable throughout your content. This is Portkey, for example, and you can see across all these different platforms, really cohesive color usage, really cohesive style of photography across all of our platforms. All of it conveys a similar sense of self. That's really what it all boils down to is how do you convey that niche that you're in to your customers in a way that's consistent? If you're going to take the time to build out your brand, then consider how that's being exemplified across all of your platforms. And you can see this for yourself if you want to visit any of Portkey's social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I guarantee if there's more social media platforms in the future, we'll be on them because we're a digital marketing company. So every platform that we're on is another facet that we use to exemplify who we are as a brand, and it makes a difference. I had someone call just the other day who was like, "Hey, I wasn't sure about you guys, but I looked at your TikTok page, got a sense of who you were, your personality, and it made a big difference." Because we are a small company, so having those resources that our customers can use to find more about our company is important. If you ever have questions about branding in the future, I'd love to help. My name again is Max Reinecke. My phone number is right there, 612-315-0535. I'll respond to a phone call. I'll respond to a text. I'll respond to an email if you feel so inclined. Or if you want to book a meeting in the future just to talk more about branding or SEO or digital marketing, any of that stuff, I'm always happy to be a resource. My Calendly link is just going to be calendly.com/max-portkey/45 minutes. And then thank you to all of you for coming today. I hope that you learned a little bit more about branding and branding for your own business or your own friends, family, whoever it is. I always kind of like to say at SCORE that it's a huge deal that you're here because you're kind of taking those first steps for your brand and your business. That's super important. And the fact that you're taking the time to learn more and educate yourself is always so, so, so crucial. So thank you for making the world a better place and educating yourself. And if you ever have questions in the future or questions right now, let me know. But that's it from me. So if you guys ever have questions, now's a good time.
All right, so Max, there's a couple questions
Okay.
that have come in during the presentation. So the first one is someone asked in the Q&A, what is your opinion on having more than one logo?
Um, I'm assuming they meant when I was talking earlier about like the Disney logo, how Disney has kind of the full word mark and then they have just kind of the D symbol icon. I think as a small business, it's better to just stick to one logo. If you need multiple logo variations, I wouldn't go beyond two. And the reason for that is because you are trying to create that really consistent brand image. So if you're suddenly splitting off and having a bunch of different logo variations as a small business, it's going to make it a lot harder for customers to recognize who you are. So having one consistent logo across platforms, that's ideal. If you need more than that, really, I wouldn't go more than two.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's see. And then there was another question. So someone asked about one of the examples that you gave. They
Yeah.
said, what did you do to differentiate Fast Films as an automotive company versus a film production?
Mm. One of the first things that we did was actually something that it came to us with was they picked the name Fast Films because of the way that it conveyed both the automotive aspect and the filming aspect, because they're, as an automotive company, their specialty was like vehicle film and vehicle wrap application. But then also because they're a training company, they wanted to teach how to film aspects of their training to their customers. So film as a word had to be imbued in their brand to really, in their opinion, exemplify the ideas of their brand. So that was one of the most prominent ways. Second way is just how we help people navigate their site. Um, because their website was a huge component, is helping people navigate to the correct training sessions was huge, so people had an easy time understanding what that was. The type of pictures that are used throughout the content, so that people had an easier time, even without reading information, figuring out what this brand was about, who their identity was, all of that. It's a big process, but I guess like the most concise answer I have is just in the name itself, Fast Films.
Okay, great. All right, there's another, okay, and there's a question that just came in here.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of that have just come in. So someone asked if you will post your contact info again, and that contact
Yeah.
info is in the deck, right, Max?
Yes, I'll post in the chat real quick.
Okay, and just so just for everybody, I know there have been a couple questions about recordings. So you will receive an email from Score with the recording. It will also have the slide deck included. And then you'll also get a link to a quick survey. And we really appreciate it so much if you take a moment to complete that survey, because it gives us feedback so that we know that the information that we're providing in the form of these workshops and webinars is helpful to you. So that's very helpful to us if you take a moment to complete that survey. So with that said, let's see. So we've got that one addressed. All right. Someone asked, can you touch on what a business can do when they have two target markets? For example, attracting businesses to partner with, and then also attracting individual customers.
Mm. Um, Well, I wouldn't do anything that excludes either of those audiences. Really what we kind of try to do in those instances is threading the needle and trying to understand what's similar between those two markets. If your niche is truly targeting two different customer groups, I think you'd be surprised by sometimes how similar those groups can be and what ways you can convey that message to both groups. Another kind of way that you can build out your brand effectively, though, is sometimes understanding when to convey certain information, when not to. So we get customers sometimes, for example, where they hold e-commerce sites where they sell products wholesale, but they also sell it individual stock to just customers who want to purchase products online. Having separate spaces for both of those aspects on their site, not just trying to group everything together, is a great way to build out your brand in a way that makes sense. Because the people who are trying to buy individual products don't want to be on the wholesale side of the site. Wholesale people don't want to be in the individual product side of the site. So differentiating when it makes sense, but then broad picture, like if we're looking at just logo and branding design, trying to find the ways that those audiences overlap so that you can create a brand that's effective across all platforms.
Okay, great. Let's see, what else do we have? We've got someone said, what can you suggest for a brand that is both my name and a brand?
Mhm.
They have a company that is just themselves
Yep.
and based on their personality, so don't want to get to exclude or get away from using their name.
No, I think that's great. A lot of small businesses that we work with, especially like solopreneurs, do just use their own name, and I think that's fine. I think the way that you can do that effectively is if you're going to use your name for your brand, own it. You know, if you have social media platforms or your website, owning up to that fact right away, like as a website, for example, because I am a website designer, so I'm going to keep mentioning websites. Um, but on your website, having some kind of bio or a picture of you like very high up on the site, one of the first things people see is huge because it's telling people, hey, you found my company, you know who I am, but now you're really going to find out who I am and you're going to get a sense of who I am through my branding voice, through this kind of concentrated effort that I've put on my site. So really that's kind of the biggest tip I can give you is if you're going to use your name as your brand, really own it.
So really leaning into who they
Yep.
are, the
Yeah.
why of
Yeah.
why they do the work, all of that, as all of those different
Yep.
aspects of their personality.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's see. We've got another one. Someone asked about how expensive it is to get a brand logo, color profiles, and an identity created.
Really depends on the company that you work for or the company that you work with. if you want to learn about Portkey's prices, I'm not sure if I can talk about that stuff during a score presentation, but you can always reach out to me to learn what our pricing is. But it really depends on kind of how robust of a system you're looking at. If you're someone who's looking at just getting a logo done, I mean, you could go to Fiverr and get someone to do it for probably $50. It's not necessarily going to be great, but you can get one done. Looking at kind of longevity of your business and building out a whole branding identity, though, is going to be a little bit more expensive just because we have to consider a lot more components of your brand and if what we're creating actually communicates effectively with your desired customers.
Mhm. Okay, cool. That makes sense. And then, like you say, Max, having that offline conversation to dig into details is probably the best way to approach that. Okay, cool. What else we have? We have someone who says they have four e-commerce stores. One is under an LLC, and the other three are DBAs, or doing business as, for anyone on the call who might not know that acronym. Would you do a logo for each of them?
Depends on what each of the stores is trying to sell. If they're all selling roughly the same thing, I would probably create one main logo for all of them. I think I have too many questions myself to be able to answer this question because now I'm wondering what's
They
the
they
reason
added
for
some
having four of
clarification that these are
them?
all different, if that helps.
Yeah, so like what's the reason for having all four of them? If they are kind of distinct brands, then I'd probably create different logos for each of them and then maybe understand that this is under some parent company and create a logo for the parent company. But really trying to understand the reason why we have all four of them and if some of them have overlapping interest or we do want to combine them, then maybe creating a group brand identity for those, but otherwise just creating kind of separate identities that can all fit under a parent umbrella.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So some of it comes down to, what is the overarching business strategy? Is this a company that's in four very different businesses, and
Yeah,
now each logo reflects that those are different businesses? Or, to your point, is there an
yeah,
opportunity to consolidate some of that, and so forth?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
cool. Let's see. Someone added some clarification on the question about having two logos. They said the one logo is more of a crest, and the second logo is more like a symbol. The letter O, feeling is the crest would resonate with older customers, but the symbol might resonate with younger generations.
Crests don't necessarily crests don't necessarily resonate more with older or younger generations. They convey a sense of history. Um, like I use Starbucks as an example of a crest logo, but crest logos themselves are not necessarily going to turn away any of your audience members. It just conveys more information about your brand being more historic. Um, Let me see. I'm wondering if I now answered all parts of that question. I'm trying to pull up the Q&A. Okay. Follow up on the two logos. The one logo is more of a crest, and the second logo is more of a symbol, the letter O. So resonate. Yeah, okay. So again, the type of logo itself does not necessarily resonate with one audience versus another. It just conveys different information about your business. O, having just the letter O maybe feels a little bit more modern, a little bit more clean cut, but that can attract both an older or a younger audience. And the crest again just conveys a sense of history about your brand. So younger audiences aren't necessarily turned away by that. A lot of young people shop at Starbucks. It just kind of conveys a sense of history and potentially quality that the O itself wouldn't convey.
Mhm. Okay, great. Let's see. And then someone asked, how do they go about getting rights for their logo?
Mm. It's a great question. Number one way you're going to do that is you should have some kind of one like a business coach who will probably be able to connect you to the appropriate legal teams that can be able to do that for you. But otherwise, if you just want to find a lawyer yourself or a legal team yourself who can find ways to legalize your logos, Google's a great resource. I recommend finding people who are local in your area that you can actually meet with in person. That's always going to be huge. But getting some kind of rights to the name of your business primarily and then to your logo subsequently.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. Okay, we've got a question here. Someone asked, what are your thoughts on branding products? And then got more detailed. So branding products, that a company produces
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. So I'm maybe not going to be the biggest expert here just because I do so much in the digital realm, but if we look at again like Target as an example, I think just product packaging across all their store really conveys a lot of different information. Target does a great job of creating pretty cohesive branding for their Target brand products that don't feel like they're from Target anymore. So it's really thought about in depth where their brand is all red and white, and then the kind of up and up products that you can find in their store aren't necessarily red and white anymore, and they use the logo icon instead of the Target icon. So it's all about, again, considering what you want for your brand. Do you want people when they buy your products to feel like they're buying your products? If the answer is yes, then it should reinforce your branding system. But if the answer is no, then maybe creating a separate identity for those products is the way that you want to go.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Someone asked about contact information again. That'll be on the slide deck that you'll get in the email follow-up. So you guys will all have Max's contact information in that email. And then, oh, and Max, thanks for reposting that.
Yep.
That's awesome. So that's all in one spot if anybody needs it. Someone commented to trademark your logo.
Yep.
Max, any information additional that you'd want to add about on that? Because that's something I'm not at all familiar with.
Again, it's going to be something that you'll want to reach out to a legal team for help with. Any of those processes, it's not going to be something that you can necessarily, in my experience, I wouldn't recommend taking it on yourself just because it's not something that you can in all instances take on yourself. And two, if you get it wrong, it's going to be a bigger headache in the future. So having someone that you can reach out to as an expert in that is my number one recommendation. As just a designer, I'm not the most experienced myself. I refer people to legal teams to kind of help them with that aspect of their project and their branding, but it's always about finding an expert is what I find.
Okay, that seems like good advice. Like you say, something that's so specialized, an attorney's
Yeah.
going to know how to navigate that process. And exactly what to do. Okay, and then we've got one more question here. And I think this was the same. I think this was from the same person who asked the question about the 4 different e-commerce stores. So
Hmm.
let's see. So would you keep your main store more professional? So it sounds like they're new to
Mhm.
this. They said their main store is a collectible store, and
Okay.
then have a golfing store, another apparel store, and a gaming store.
Keep your main store. Main store is a collectible store. There's golfing store, another apparel, lastly gaming store. So those have just off the bat very different. They all convey very different feelings to me. If all of these different kind of branches fill some kind of unique niche, then I'd kind of try to make them cohesive based on that niche. But there isn't necessarily a reason for your main store to be more professional unless that's somewhere where you're expecting more professional interactions to happen. It's all about what you want. So if you want that main store to be a more professional environment, then I would. But if you don't need it to be more professional, then I don't think it has to be. If we're looking at all these different options, maybe the golfing store is the one that you want to feel most professional, or maybe the apparel store is the one you want most professional. But the collectible store, purely because it's your main store, doesn't need to be the most professional one. Although in that instance, again, I think I'd have to actually meet with you one-on-one to kind of form an effective branding strategy.
That's interesting that, as kind of an example of this though, because to your point, it's like,
Yeah.
there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. It seems
Yes.
like as far as it all depends on what the target audience is, what they are expecting the brand to reflect and
Yeah.
so.
And I'll always use that Turbo Tim as an example, the Turbo Tim store, because they kind of do something there that I think was really unusual and probably wouldn't have been advisable to people working in the auto industry to just say, hey, we want cats to be in our auto store and we want that to be a really big highlight and we want to paint our building all these bright colors. Like I think from an outside perspective that maybe wouldn't have made sense, but to them as a business owner, they knew their niche, they knew what they wanted to do. It made sense to them and they stuck with it. And it built and built over time because they did it in a way that was really authentic and in a way that really made sense to the brand that they had built up.
Yeah, that's a great example. It definitely is an interesting, how much of their sort of personality is reflected in that.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about that. I mean, when I think about that anyway, car repair is an industry that it seems like a lot of times there's not
Yeah.
personality that goes along with the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's never, I would say across industries, there's always room to be professional and there's always room to be unprofessional. It all depends on kind of what you're looking to get out of it. And what you're expecting, what like your customers are also expecting to get out of it.
Awesome. So if anyone else has other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, I think that's an interesting place to wrap up here with that example. And like you say, Max, that there's room to do a lot of different things when it comes to
Yeah.
branding. So um
Mhm.
well, thank you again, Max.
Yeah.
This is a great presentation, awesome information today. Thank you for everyone who joined us, and look for the follow-up email from SCORE that usually comes out either this afternoon or you may get it tomorrow. And thank you all for being here. Look forward to seeing you on another workshop or webinar sometime soon.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Take care.